In a galaxy teeming with ancient empires and powerful civilizations, humanity was nothing more than an afterthought. The Zephyrian Empire, a coalition of the universe's most advanced species, mocked Earth's very existence. The Galactic Council, in their arrogance, dismissed humanity's plea for recognition as little more than a joke. But the Council underestimated the one thing that could turn the tide: human resolve. When Admiral Kethvar's scornful laughter echoed across the stars, it sealed the fate of the galaxy. Earth's response was silent, but it spoke louder than any words ever could. The trial of supremacy had been issued, and humanity's answer would come not from the noise of war, but the quiet fury of one man, Marcus Reed. A weapon known only as Asset 7, humanity's secret and soon-to-be greatest weapon. When giants laugh at ants, the great hall of the Zephyrian Empire stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and flowing energy. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each more magnificent than the last. The Valkyrie floated in shimmering energy pods, their tentacled forms pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. The Thorak delegation stood motionless like living mountains of stone and metal, their cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the artificial suns that lit the chamber. The Namari twisted through the air in graceful spirals, their gossamer wings creating rainbow patterns as they moved. At the center of this magnificent display sat the Galactic Council's ruling body, 12 beings who controlled the fate of trillions across known space. Their leader, Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian military caste, rose from his throne of living crystal. His forearms spread wide in a gesture of dominance, his scaled hide shifting from deep blue to threatening crimson as he prepared to address the assembly. The topic today was humanity's third application for membership in the galactic community. 3 times they had submitted their credentials. 3 times they had been rejected. Today would mark their final humiliation. Kethvar's voice boomed through the chamber, enhanced by neural amplifiers that carried his words to every corner of the vast space. Honored representatives, we gather once again to discuss the persistent requests of the species calling itself humanity. These bipedal mammals from the 3rd planet of an unremarkable yellow star continue to believe they deserve a place among the civilized races of our galaxy. Laughter rippled through the assembly, a sound like breaking glass, mixed with grinding metal and alien harmonics that no human ear had ever heard. The Valkyrie's bioluminescence flickered in patterns of amusement. The Thorak's optical sensors flashed in synchronized mockery. Even the usually diplomatic Namari chittered with barely contained mirth. Let us review their credentials. Kethvar continued, his tone dripping with disdain. They have achieved faster-than-light travel, yes, but only through the most primitive of methods, chemical propulsion augmented by crude gravitational manipulation. Their fastest ships take months to cross distances our vessels cover in days. A holographic display materialized above the assembly, showing grainy footage of human spacecraft. The designs looked clunky and industrial compared to the sleek, organic curves of Zephyrian vessels or the geometric perfection of Thorak engineering. The ships moved with visible effort, leaving trails of exotic particles that the advanced races had abandoned centuries ago. Observe their military capabilities, Kethvar said with theatrical disgust. More footage appeared, showing human soldiers in bulky armor carrying primitive kinetic weapons. They still use projectile firearms, actual chunks of metal hurled through space by chemical explosions. Their troops march in formation like insects, following simple commands without the neural networking that allows proper coordination. The footage showed battles from humanity's recent conflicts with space pirates and rouge mining operations. Human soldiers advanced across barren asteroid surfaces, their movements appearing slow and clumsy compared to the fluid grace of more advanced species. They took cover behind crude barriers, communicated through primitive radio signals, and fought with a determination that the assembled aliens found both amusing and pathetic. Most telling of all, Kethvar's voice rose to a crescendo. They persist in this delusion that individual combat prowess matters in modern warfare. They actually train their soldiers in hand-to-hand combat. hand to hand, as if personal physical confrontation has any relevance in an age of energy weapons and orbital bombardment. The assembly erupted in genuine laughter now. The concept was so absurd that even the most diplomatic species couldn't contain their amusement. Several delegations began sharing their own stories of primitive species they had encountered, each trying to top the others in describing the quaint backwardness of pre-technological civilizations. But their mockery was interrupted by a soft chime that filled the chamber. A communication request from Earth had arrived, transmitted across the vast distances of space with the kind of instantaneous quantum entanglement communication that humanity had only recently mastered. The image that appeared was simple compared to the magnificent technology surrounding it. A middle-aged human woman in a plain gray suit stood in what appeared to be a modest office. No floating crystals, no energy halos, no cybernetic enhancements. Just Ambassador Chen Wei, humanity's representative to the galactic community, looking directly into the camera with calm, dark eyes. Honored members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice clear despite the vast distance. We have received word of today's proceedings. We understand your decision to deny our application for membership. Kethvar leaned forward, anticipating the pleas and bargaining that typically followed such rejections. Primitive species often offered tributes, technologies, or even subjugation in exchange for consideration. However, Chen continued, we also understand that doubts remain about humanity's worthiness to stand among the stars. We propose a solution that should satisfy any concerns about our capabilities. The chamber fell silent. This was not the response they had expected. The trial of supremacy, Chen said, simply, an ancient right recognized by galactic law, used when a species' qualifications are disputed. We formally invoke this right and challenge the Zephyrian Empire to prove their claims about human inadequacy. Gasps echoed through the assembly. The trial of supremacy hadn't been invoked in over 3 centuries. It was a relic from the early days of galactic civilization, designed to settle disputes through direct confrontation rather than endless political maneuvering that Kethvar's scales shifted to deep purple, a sign of surprise and growing anger. You cannot be serious. The trial requires you to face our finest warriors in direct combat. Our champions are enhanced beings, perfected through millennia of genetic engineering and cybernetic augmentation. Your primitive soldiers would be slaughtered within moments. Nevertheless, Chen replied calmly, we invoke our right under Article 7 of the Galactic Accords. Will the Zephyrian Empire accept our challenge, or will they be remembered as the species that feared to face humans in fair combat? The insult was perfectly calculated. To refuse would suggest weakness, something no species could afford in the complex political landscape of galactic civilization. But to accept seemed like authorizing a massacre. Kethvar found himself trapped between appearing cowardly or seeming cruel. Very well, he growled, his scales now shifting between purple and crimson. The trial of supremacy is accepted, but understand, humans, that you have chosen your own destruction. Our champions will show no mercy to primitives who dare challenge the natural order. Understood, Chen nodded. We will send our representative to the designated trial station within the standard time frame. Thank you for accepting our challenge. The transmission ended, leaving the vast chamber in stunned silence. Then the whispers began. Representatives huddled in their delegations, discussing the unprecedented development. Some felt pity for humanity's suicidal gesture. Others were excited by the prospect of witnessing such an entertaining slaughter. A few wondered if there was something they were missing, some hidden factor that would explain humanity's confidence that Kethvar immediately began planning the spectacle. The trial would be broadcast across the galaxy, serving as both entertainment and a warning to other primitive species who might harbor similar delusions of grandeur. He selected 12 of the Zephyrian Empire's finest champions, each representing a different aspect of advanced warfare. There was Garath the Immovable, a thorac warrior whose cybernetic body could withstand direct hits from orbital bombardment platforms. His neural processors could calculate thousands of combat scenarios in microseconds, and his integrated weapon systems could level city blocks. Scythia the Swift represented an Amari contribution, her modified nervous system allowing her to move faster than most beings could think. Her wings had been replaced with energy projectors that could slice through starship hulls, and her enhanced reflexes made her nearly impossible to target. From the Valkyrie came Mindrender Xylos, whose psychic abilities could paralyze enemies from kilometers away. His consciousness existed partially in hyperspace, making physical attacks largely irrelevant while he destroyed opponents through pure mental force. 9 others joined them, each a perfect killing machine representing the pinnacle of their species' military evolution. Together, they had fought in dozens of conflicts, conquered entire star systems, and never known defeat. The trial station was prepared with equal care. Located in neutral space, it was a massive construct designed specifically for such confrontations. Multiple environments could be generated within its arena, from the crushing gravity of gas giant surfaces to the zero-atmosphere void of deep space. Every possible advantage would be given to the defenders to ensure the trial's outcome was never in doubt. The AS news of the challenge spread across the galaxy. Betting pools opened on dozens of worlds. The odds were astronomical against humanity. Some gamblers placed novelty bets on how long the human representative would survive. The most optimistic estimates gave them perhaps 30 seconds before being completely destroyed on Earth. A different kind of preparation was taking place. In a nondescript building in Geneva, Ambassador Chun Wei sat across from a figure that seemed to fade at the edges of perception. Even in the secure room with multiple sensor arrays and recording devices, he appeared somehow indistinct, as if reality itself had trouble focusing on him. Asset 7, she said quietly, "Are you prepared for this?" The figure nodded once. When he spoke, his voice was calm and unremarkable, the kind of voice that would be forgotten moments after hearing it. "The parameters are acceptable. Threat assessment complete. Mission profile understood." "They're sending their best," Chen warned. 12 champions, each one capable of destroying a small city. Enhanced beings with centuries of combat experience. Acknowledged, Asset 7 replied, "Is there anything else?" Chun hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Marcus, this isn't just about membership anymore. Intel suggests they're planning something larger. If humanity fails this trial spectacularly enough, some factions want to use it as justification for preemptive strikes against Earth. They're afraid of what we might become." For the first time, something flickered behind Asset 7's eyes. Not emotion exactly, but a kind of cold calculation that seemed to encompass vast possibilities. Then failure is not an option. He stood to leave, moving with an economy of motion that made him seem to simply transition from sitting to standing without the intermediate steps. At the door, he paused. "Ambassador, please ensure that Earth's diplomatic channels remain open during the trial. There may be opportunities for negotiation afterward." After he left, Chin sat alone in the secure room, wondering if she had just unleashed something that even Earth's government didn't fully understand. Asset 7 had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for decades, a product of programs so classified that only a handful of people knew they existed. His real name was Marcus Reed, though even that was probably an operational identity. His origins were lost in layers of black budget projects and experimental military programs that officially had never happened. What was known was that he had been selected as a child for capabilities that normal human psychology couldn't explain. The ability to remain unnoticed even when in plain sight, reflexes that bordered on precognition, a tactical intellect that could process battlefield information faster than most computers. He had been trained by specialists whose own identities were classified above her clearance level. His operational history was a list of impossible missions completed with minimal resources and no backup. Terrorist cells eliminated, rogue governments toppled, alien infiltrators neutralized before they could report back to their home worlds. But he had never faced anything like this. 12 superhuman champions in a controlled environment broadcast to the entire galaxy. No stealth, no surprise, no backup plan except victory or death. S-Chun prepared for the diplomatic crisis that would follow either outcome, Marcus Reed was already aboard a transport heading for the trial station. The ship was deliberately chosen to appear unremarkable, an older civilian vessel that looked like a converted cargo hauler. Its pilot was a regular Navy officer with no knowledge of his passenger's true nature. Marcus sat in the small passenger compartment, reviewing tactical data on a simple tablet computer. The files contained everything humanity had learned about the 12 champions, their weapons, their fighting styles, their psychological profiles. It wasn't much, but it would be enough. He closed the tablet and leaned back in his seat, his eyes unfocused as he ran through combat scenarios in his mind. The aliens expected a primitive human soldier, clumsy and straightforward in their thinking. They expected someone who would charge headfirst into battle, relying on courage and determination to overcome superior technology. They were going to be disappointed. Outside the transport's viewports, the trial station grew larger against the starfield. Soon, the galaxy would learn why Earth had remained so quiet about its true capabilities. Soon, they would understand that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their numbers. The IT had always been their ability to be underestimated. When the Quiet Ones speak, the trial station was a monument to Zephyrian engineering prowess, a crystalline structure the size of a small moon that hung in the void like a glittering jewel. Its faceted surfaces reflected starlight in patterns that seemed almost alive, creating an aurora of colors that danced across its kilometer-wide arena chambers. Inside, artificial gravity generators maintained perfect Earth-normal conditions, while force field projectors could simulate any environment in known space. The main arena stretched before the assembled delegates like a vast amphitheater. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had come to witness what they believed would be humanity's final humiliation. The Valkyrie floated in their observation pods, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing with anticipation. Thorak delegations stood motionless as statues, their optical sensors trained on the arena floor. Namari representatives darted through the air in complex aerial dances that expressed their excitement. The center of it all, 12 figures stood in perfect formation. The Zephyrian Empire's finest champions, each one a masterpiece of genetic engineering and cybernetic enhancement. They had been positioned to create maximum visual impact, their diverse forms representing the pinnacle of military evolution from across the galaxy. Garath the Immovable dominated the center of the formation, his massive thorax frame bristling with integrated weapon systems. Servo motors whined softly as he tested his mechanical joints, each movement precise and calculated. His optical array swept the arena in methodical patterns, recording every detail for tactical analysis. To his left, Scythia the Swift hovered a meter above the arena floor, her modified Namari form crackling with barely contained energy. Her wings had been replaced with projection arrays that cast dancing patterns of lethal light around her position. She moved in constant motion, never quite still, her enhanced reflexes keeping her ready to strike at the first sign of movement. Mind-Drender Xylos represented the Valkyrie contribution to the trial, his tentacled form suspended in a sphere of psychic energy that distorted the air around him. His consciousness flickered between dimensions, tasting the thoughts and fears of every being in the arena. To most observers, he was the most terrifying of the champions, capable of killing with nothing more than focused mental energy. 9 others completed the formation, each one a legend in their own right. They had fought in the Centauri Uprising, the Siege of Proxima Station, and the Void Wars that had reshaped 3 star systems. Between them, they had centuries of combat experience and a kill count that spanned multiple species. The arena itself had been configured to showcase their abilities. Multiple terrain zones created a diverse battlefield, from crystalline formations that would shatter under heavy weapons fire to energy pools that could be manipulated by those with the proper enhancements. Overhead, thousands of recording drones captured every angle, broadcasting the spectacle to trillions of viewers across the galaxy. Admiral Kethvar stood at the primary observation platform, his scaled hide shifting between anticipation and satisfaction. Around him, The ruling council of the galactic community had assembled to witness what they believed would be the definitive proof of humanity's unworthiness. Several had placed wagers on how quickly the human representative would be defeated. Honored beings, Kefvar's voice echoed through the arena, enhanced by neural amplifiers that carried his words to every corner of the vast space. Today, we witness the trial of supremacy invoked by the primitive species known as humanity. They have challenged our champions to prove their worth among the civilized races of our galaxy. The crowd responded with a mixture of cheers and laughter. Many species had stories of their own encounters with primitive civilizations, and the consensus was clear. This would be educational for any other backward species that might harbor similar delusions. Our champions represent the finest military evolution in known space. Kefvar continued, gesturing toward the 12 figures on the arena floor. They face a single representative of humanity's so-called military prowess. Let this serve as a lesson to any who would challenge the natural order of galactic civilization. A soft chime indicated the arrival of Earth's representative. The crowd fell silent as every recording device in the arena focused on the transport bay doors. They expected to see a figure in advanced armor or perhaps a group of soldiers despite the trial's single combat requirement. Some anticipated a desperate last-minute withdrawal, with humanity finally recognizing the impossibility of their situation. Instead, the doors opened to reveal a single human male walking calmly across the arena floor. He appeared completely ordinary, wearing simple gray clothing that looked more like a maintenance uniform than military gear. No visible weapons, no armor, no enhancement technology. He carried a small bag slung over one shoulder and moved with the unhurried pace of someone out for a casual walk. The silence in the arena became profound. Thousands of beings struggled to process what they were seeing. The human looked so normal, so unremarkable, that many observers initially assumed he was a technician or arena staff member who had wandered onto the battlefield by mistake. Marcus Reed walked to the center of the arena and stopped approximately 50 meters from the champion formation. He set his bag down carefully, opened it, and removed a single item, a simple water bottle. He took a drink, capped the bottle, and returned it to the bag with movements that were economical and precise. Then he looked up at the observation platforms, and for just a moment his gaze seemed to find each delegate individually. It was impossible, of course. The platforms were too far away, and the angles too steep. But somehow, every being in the arena felt the weight of his attention, as if he was memorizing their faces for future reference. Kefvar leaned forward, his confusion evident in the rapid color changes across his scales. This was not what he had expected from a species that had formally challenged the Empire's military supremacy. Where was the desperation? The feudal bravado? The dramatic speeches about honor and courage? Human representative, Kefvar's amplified voice boomed across the arena. State your name and rank for the record. Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if considering whether the question deserved an answer. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost conversational, but somehow it carried clearly to every corner of the vast space. Marcus Reed, that's sufficient. No rank, no unit designation, no dramatic proclamation of intent. The crowd began to murmur, uncertain how to interpret such a subdued response. This was supposed to be the climax of humanity's military representation, yet their champion seemed more interested in staying hydrated than facing galactic civilization's finest warriors. Very well. Kefvar growled, his patience wearing thin. Let the trial begin. Champions, you are authorized to commence combat. What happened next would be analyzed and debated for decades afterward. The 12 champions moved as one, their formations and tactics perfected through centuries of cooperation. Garatha's weapon systems came online with a sound like thunder, energy cascades building to lethal levels. Scythia became a blur of motion, her energy projectors creating a web of deadly light. Mindrender Xylos reached out with his psychic abilities, seeking to paralyze the human's nervous system before the physical battle could even begin. Marcus Reed stood perfectly still, The psychic attack struck first, invisible waves of mental energy designed to overwhelm human consciousness. Xylos had used this technique to disable entire platoons of enemy soldiers, reducing them to catatonic vegetables in moments. But as his power washed over the human, something strange happened. Instead of finding a mind to crush, he encountered something that felt like empty space. Not vacancy, but a kind of structural absence that his psychic abilities couldn't grasp. Before Xylos could adjust his technique, Marcus moved. Not the desperate scrambling the champions expected, but a series of movements so precise they seemed choreographed. He stepped left exactly as Garatha's first energy blast scorched the air where he had been standing. He dropped to one knee as Scythia's cutting beam passed overhead. He rolled forward as three other champions opened fire simultaneously, their combined firepower sufficient to level a city block. None of it touched him. The crowd's murmur rose to an excited buzz as they watched the human weave between attacks that should have been impossible to avoid. His movements weren't faster than the champion's enhanced reflexes, but they were perfectly timed, as if he knew where each attack would be before it was launched. Garath recalibrated his targeting systems, confused by the tactical data streaming into his processors. The human's movements followed no recognizable pattern, yet somehow anticipated every strike with uncanny precision. He concentrated his fire, creating an overlapping kill zone that should have been inescapable. Marcus stepped sideways into what appeared to be the path of greatest danger and emerged untouched as the energy beams converged on empty air behind him. Without breaking stride, he reached into his bag and withdrew a handful of what looked like small metal spheres. The crowd leaned forward, expecting some kind of primitive explosive devices. Instead, Marcus simply tossed them in seemingly random directions across the arena floor. They scattered like marbles, rolling into crevices and settling against crystal formations with soft metallic sounds. Several champions paused, scanning the spheres for energy signatures or chemical compositions that might indicate their purpose. The devices appeared to be nothing more than polished metal balls, completely inert and harmless. That was when Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the arena. It wasn't an expression of humor or confidence, but something cold and calculating that seemed to transform his entire presence. The crowd fell silent again, though they couldn't have explained why. Scythia attacked first, her enhanced speed carrying her forward in a blur of motion that the recording devices could barely track. Her energy projectors reached full power, creating a cone of destruction that would have vaporized a tank. But as she closed the distance, one of Marcus's metal spheres suddenly activated. The explosion was small, barely enough to crack the crystal formation it was resting against. But it sent shrapnel flying in precisely calculated directions, each fragment following a trajectory that would have been impossible to plan without detailed knowledge of the arena's layout and the champion's positioning. One piece of crystal struck Scythia's left wing projector at exactly the right angle to overload its power coupling. Another fragment shattered against Garatha's optical array, temporarily blinding his targeting system. A third piece triggered a cascade failure in one of Mindrender Xylos' psychic amplifiers, disrupting his connection to hyperspace. The champions reeled, more surprised than damaged, but suddenly aware that their opponent was not the primitive they had expected. The metal spheres had been placed with surgical precision, each one positioned to create maximum disruption with minimal effort. But Marcus was already moving to the next phase of his plan. As the champions struggled to regain their coordination, he sprinted toward the nearest crystal formation with movements that were economical and purposeful. He reached into his bag again, withdrawing what appeared to be simple climbing equipment. Ropes, spikes, and a small hammered Garatha's targeting system came back online just as Marcus reached the crystal wall. The Thorak warrior's weapon systems tracked him, energy cascades building to maximum power. At this range, even a near miss would be fatal to an unarmored target. Marcus drove a spike into the crystal surface and attached his rope with movements that were precise and unhurried. Then, just as Garath fired, he used the rope to swing in a wide arc that carried him completely around the crystal formation and out of a line of fire. The energy blast struck the crystal where Marcus had been standing, shattering it into thousands of fragments that filled the air like deadly snow. But Marcus was already elsewhere, his rope carrying him to a new position where he could observe the entire battlefield from his elevated position. He pulled out a simple pair of binoculars and began studying the champions' formations. The crowd watched in fascination as he took notes in a small notebook, occasionally nodding to himself as if confirming theoretical calculations with observed data that Kethvar's scales had shifted to deep purple, a sign of growing concern. This was not the desperate struggle he had anticipated. The human was treating the trial like a scientific experiment, testing hypotheses and gathering information while the galaxy's finest warriors stumbled over tactics that should have been elementary. The champions regrouped their enhanced communication systems, allowing them to coordinate despite the chaos Marcus had created. They formed a new formation designed to eliminate his mobility advantages, with overlapping fields of fire that would cover every possible escape route. Marcus watched them reorganize through his binoculars, then closed his notebook with what appeared to be satisfaction. He descended from his crystal perch with casual efficiency, landing lightly on the arena floor as if he had simply stepped down from a curb. Then he walked directly toward the 12 champions, his hands empty and his pace unhurried. The crowd held its collective breath, certain that this was humanity's final suicidal gesture. Instead, it was the moment when the trial truly began. As Marcus approached the killing ground, the last of his metal spheres activated. But these explosions were different, releasing clouds of metallic particles that dispersed through the arena atmosphere. The particles were so fine they were nearly invisible, drifting like microscopic dust through the air. The champions' enhanced senses detected the contamination immediately, but their analysis showed nothing dangerous. The particles appeared to be inert metal fragments, too small to cause physical damage and carrying no toxic or radioactive signatures. What they didn't realize was that the particles were designed to interfere with their enhanced communication systems. As the microscopic metal settled into their cybernetic components, it created subtle electromagnetic disruptions that degraded their coordination protocols. Suddenly, the champions found themselves operating as individuals rather than as a coordinated unit. Marcus reached into his bag one final time and withdrew the most primitive weapon imaginable, a simple knife with a blade no longer than his hand. The crowd gasped at the absurdity of it. A metal blade against energy weapons and cybernetic enhancement systems seemed like the ultimate expression of human foolishness. But as Marcus held the knife, something changed in his demeanor. The casual, almost bored expression disappeared, replaced by a focus so intense it seemed to bend reality around him. His eyes tracked each champion individually, cataloging weaknesses and calculating probabilities with an efficiency that would have impressed the most advanced tactical computers. The 12 champions, the finest warriors in galactic civilization, suddenly found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. A human being who had been designed from birth to excel at one specific task, the systematic elimination of superior opponents. Marcus moved forward to engage them in close combat. The recording devices captured something that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of human capabilities. Not the primitive desperation they had expected, but a demonstration of evolution's most successful survival strategy, the ability to adapt, learn, and overcome any challenge through intelligence, preparation, and absolute determination. The trial was about to become a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. Part 3. When silence becomes thunder. The moment Marcus Reed stepped into close combat range, the nature of the trial changed fundamentally. What had been a demonstration of technological superiority became something far more primal and terrifying to the watching delegates. The 12 champions, each one a masterpiece of enhancement and engineering, found themselves facing an opponent who negated their advantages through methods they couldn't comprehend. Garath the Immovable was the first to engage, his massive frame moving with mechanical precision as integrated weapon systems targeted the human. His cybernetic enhancements calculated optimal firing solutions while defensive protocols prepared for counterattack. What he didn't anticipate was Marcus simply disappearing from his targeting sensors, not through stealth technology or cloaking devices, but through an understanding of sensor limitations that bordered on supernatural. Marcus moved in the spaces between detection sweeps, positioned himself in electromagnetic shadows created by the arena's own systems, and used the metallic particles he had dispersed to create false returns that confused automated tracking. When Garath finally acquired a target lock, Marcus was already inside his reach, the simple knife sliding between armor plates with surgical precision. The blade found exactly the right angle to sever a critical power coupling, causing Garath's left arm to seize in a shower of sparks. Before the Thorak warrior could compensate, Marcus had moved on to his next target. Scythia the Swift attempted to use her enhanced speed to overwhelm the human through rapid attacks from multiple angles. Her remaining wing projector created a web of cutting energy while she darted around Marcus in patterns too fast for normal perception to follow. But Marcus wasn't relying on normal perception. He moved with each of her attacks, not trying to match her speed, but predicting her patterns through an understanding of momentum and energy expenditure that treated her like a complex physics problem. When she overextended during a particularly aggressive pass, he was waiting with the knife positioned exactly where her trajectory would carry her. The blade traced a line across her remaining wing projector, not trying to cut through its armored housing, but finding the tiny gap where power conduits connected to control systems. Scythia crashed to the arena floor in a tumble of sparks and failing technology, her enhanced speed suddenly more liability than advantage. Mindrender Xylos launched a desperate psychic assault, pouring his full power into an attack designed to shut down Marcus's nervous system entirely. The Valkyrie's consciousness reached across dimensions, seeking to grip the human's mind and crush it like fragile crystal. But once again, his psychic abilities found nothing to grasp. Marcus's mental structure seemed to exist in a state that psychic powers couldn't affect, as if his consciousness operated on frequencies that bypassed normal telepathic contact. Worse, the effort left Xylos temporarily vulnerable as his attention focused on the impossible attack. Marcus used those crucial seconds to close distance, his knife finding the delicate neural interfaces that connected Xylos to his psychic amplifiers. Without those technological enhancements, the Valkyrie's natural abilities were reduced to party tricks. The remaining 9 champions attacked simultaneously, abandoning coordinated tactics for overwhelming force. Energy weapons discharged in all directions, filling the arena with deadly light. Enhancement systems operated at maximum output, creating displays of power that should have been sufficient to level mountains. Marcus moved through the chaos like water flowing around stones, each step calculated to take him exactly where the weapons weren't firing. He used the champions' own attacks against each other, positioning himself so that missed shots struck other targets. Within moments, 3 champions had been disabled by friendly fire from their own allies. The crowd watched in stunned silence as their greatest warriors fell one by one to an opponent who seemed to exist in the spaces between their abilities. No single exchange lasted more than seconds, but each encounter left another champion neutralized through methods that appeared impossibly precise. When the last champion fell, Marcus stood alone in the center of the arena, surrounded by the prone forms of 12 beings who had never known defeat. His simple knife was clean, having been used not as a weapon, but as a tool for disabling technology with minimal damage to living beings. None of the champions were dead, but all were completely unable to continue fighting. The silence in the arena was absolute. Thousands of beings struggled to process what they had witnessed. This hadn't been a battle in any sense they understood. It had been a systematic demonstration of superiority, so complete that it redefined their understanding of combat effectiveness. Admiral Kethvar's scales had shifted through every color in the spectrum before settling on a pale gray that indicated complete psychological shock. When he finally found his voice, it cracked with disbelief. Impossible. This outcome is impossible. No primitive species could defeat enhanced warriors through such methods. Marcus looked up at the observation platform, his expression calm and unremarkable once again. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the arena's acoustic systems without any technological amplification. The trial is complete. Humanity has demonstrated its combat effectiveness against your finest champions. We trust this satisfies any questions about our worthiness for galactic membership. But before Kethvar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the arena in pulsing red as the station's defense systems detected incoming vessels. The main display screens showed sensor readings that made several delegates gasp in shock. 47 ships had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Not human ships with their characteristic industrial design, but vessels that incorporated technology from every major species in the galaxy. Zephyrian energy manipulation systems, Thorak engineering precision, Valkyrie consciousness interfaces, and Namari quantum processing cores, all seamlessly integrated into designs that surpassed anything the assembled delegates had ever seen. The fleet arranged itself in a perfect sphere around the trial station, each ship positioned with mathematical precision that demonstrated coordination beyond current galactic standards. Their weapon signatures were online, but not targeting anything, creating an unmistakable message. Humanity had the capability to destroy everything in the system, but was choosing restraint. Kethvar's command staff frantically attempted to contact the station's defensive systems, only to discover that every military protocol had been quietly disabled, not through brute force hacking or electromagnetic warfare, but through access codes that suggested intimate knowledge of Zephyrian security architecture. How? Kethvar's voice was barely a whisper, his scales now shifting between gray and the deep black that indicated existential terror. How do you possess our technology? Our ships? Our codes? Marcus reached into his bag and withdrew a simple communication device. As he activated it, holographic displays materialized throughout the arena, showing images that made the assembled delegates recoil in shock. The first image showed a Zephyrian research facility that several council members recognized. Scientists worked at familiar stations, conducting experiments that looked completely normal except for one detail. Half of the research staff were human. They moved through the facility with casual familiarity, accessing classified systems and collaborating on projects that were supposed to be state secrets. The next image showed a Thorak military academy where human instructors taught advanced engineering concepts to cybernetic warriors who listened with obvious respect. The humans wore no identifying marks, but their presence was clearly accepted and valued by beings who supposedly viewed them as primitive. More images followed, each one revealing the same impossible truth. Humans working alongside every major species in the galaxy, not as conquered subjects or junior partners, but as equals who had earned their positions through demonstrated competence. For the past 50 years, Marcus said, quietly, humanity has been present in your societies, not as invaders or infiltrators, but as individuals who prove their worth through actions rather than words. Your own scientists invited our researchers to collaborate on projects. Your military academies requested our tactical instructors. Your engineers sought our consultation on problems their technology couldn't solve. The implications crashed over the assembled delegates like a physical force. Every major advancement in galactic civilization over the past half-century had involved human contribution. The Zephyrian breakthrough in quantum consciousness transfer, the Thorak development of self-repairing cybernetic systems, the Valkyrie expansion into higher-dimensional mathematics, the Namari mastery of temporal mechanics, all of it had been accomplished with human collaboration. We never conquered your technology, Marcus continued, his voice remaining conversational despite the magnitude of his revelations. We improved it. We never stole your secrets. We helped develop them. The ships surrounding the station represent the true state of human capabilities. Not primitive, but so advanced that we chose to remain invisible rather than disrupt galactic stability. Ambassador Chenwei's image appeared on the communication displays, her expression grave as she addressed the stunned assembly. The trial of supremacy was never about proving our combat effectiveness. It was about demonstrating the consequences of forcing humanity into an adversarial position. She gestured to data displays that showed shipping routes, trade agreements, and technological dependencies that connected every species in the galaxy. For decades, we have been the invisible foundation supporting galactic civilization. Our researchers solve problems your scientists couldn't approach. Our engineers design systems your species depend on for survival. Our diplomatic efforts resolve conflicts before they escalate to warfare. The truth was becoming clear to even the most resistant delegates. Humanity hadn't been seeking membership in galactic civilization because they needed protection or resources. They had been trying to prevent the systematic collapse that would follow their withdrawal from collaborative efforts. You believed us primitive because we allowed you to believe it, Chen continued. Our combat doctrine appears simple because complexity is inefficiency. Our technology seems crude because elegance requires understanding that goes beyond surface appearances. Our diplomatic approach appears weak because true strength is exercised through restraint. Kethvar found his voice again, though it trembled with implications he was only beginning to understand. What do you want from us? Subjugation? Tribute? Revenge for our mockery? Marcus tilted his head slightly as if the question surprised him. We want exactly what we requested, membership in the galactic community, recognition as equals rather than primitives, the ability to contribute openly to galactic civilization instead of working from the shadows. And if we refuse, the question hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus considered it carefully before responding, his expression remaining calm and thoughtful. Then humanity will withdraw from all collaborative efforts. Our researchers will return to Earth. Our engineers will cease providing consultation. Our diplomatic channels will close. Within 6 months, half the star systems in this galaxy will experience technological failures that your current expertise cannot resolve. He paused, letting the implications settle over the assembly. We are not threatening conquest. We are explaining consequences. Galactic civilization has become dependent on human innovation in ways you never recognized because we never sought credit for our contributions. Remove that foundation, and the structure collapses. The delegates began urgent conferences, their enhanced communication systems buzzing with encrypted exchanges as each species calculated the implications of what they had learned. The Thorak delegation ran diagnostics on their cybernetic systems, discovering human-designed components they had never noticed. The Velkari probed their consciousness interfaces, finding optimization algorithms that bore unmistakable signs of human mathematical thinking. Slowly, reluctantly, the assembled representatives began to understand the true scope of their miscalculation. They had spent decades mocking humanity's primitive nature while unknowingly depending on human innovation for their survival. There is another option, Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through the growing chaos of desperate conferences. Integration, not as a junior partner seeking approval, but as an equal member contributing openly to galactic advancement. He gestured toward the holographic displays, which now showed projection models of technological and social development under different scenarios. With full human participation, galactic civilization could advance centuries beyond its current state within decades. Energy problems that have plagued civilizations for millennia could be solved. Transportation technologies that would make the galaxy truly accessible. Consciousness expansion that would allow beings to transcend their current limitations. The projections were compelling, showing possibilities that made even the most advanced species reconsider their assumptions about technological ceilings. But they also carried an implicit warning. These advances would be possible only through cooperation, not through the domination and hierarchy that had defined galactic politics for centuries. Kethvar looked around the arena, seeing his fallen champions beginning to stir as emergency medical systems tended to their injuries. None were seriously hurt, but all bore the unmistakable mark of having been defeated by someone who could have killed them easily but chose restraint instead. If we accept humanity into the galactic community, he said slowly, what assurance do we have that your species won't use its advantages to dominate others? Marcus smiled for the second time since entering the arena, but this expression was different from his earlier cold calculation. It carried genuine warmth and something that might have been hope. the same assurance that has prevented us from doing so for the past 50 years. Humanity's greatest strength has never been our technology or our combat effectiveness. It has been our understanding that true progress comes through cooperation rather than conquest. He picked up his bag and slung it over his shoulder, preparing to leave the arena. You have 48 hours to make your decision. If the galactic community chooses to accept humanity as an equal member, our collaborative efforts will continue and expand. If not, we will withdraw to Earth and leave you to face the galaxy's challenges without our assistance. As Marcus walked toward the arena exit, the delegates watched in silence. The trial was over, but its consequences were just beginning. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had learned that their assumptions about primitive species were dangerously flawed, and that true strength often wore the mask of humility. The 47 ships surrounding the station began powering down their weapon systems, but remained in position as a reminder of capabilities that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Each vessel represented not a threat, but a choice: cooperation or isolation, progress or stagnation, integration or collapse. As news of the trial's outcome spread across the galaxy, reaction varied from shock to disbelief to grudging admiration. Some species began reviewing their own assumptions about technological development and social progress. Others searched their systems for signs of human influence they had previously overlooked. But in the depths of space, aboard ships that flew routes no government had chartered, other figures watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Asset 7 had been humanity's public face for this operation, but he was not alone. Dozens of other individuals, equally capable and equally invisible, had spent decades preparing for this moment. The Silent Protocol had been more than a military operation. It had been a comprehensive demonstration that true power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to remain hidden until revelation became necessary. 48 hours later, the galactic community's response arrived through official diplomatic channels. It was brief, formal, and carried the unanimous approval of all member species. The galactic community formally recognizes humanity as a full member civilization with all rights and privileges accorded to founding species. We look forward to open collaboration in advancing galactic civilization for the benefit of all sentient beings. The message was signed by Admiral Kethvar himself, though those who knew him noticed that his scales had remained a contemplative gray for weeks afterward on Earth. Ambassador Chinwei filed her final report on the operation and looked forward to humanity's first open diplomatic mission to the galactic capital. The Age of Shadows was ending, replaced by something far more promising, an era where humanity's greatest contributions could be made in the light of open cooperation. And somewhere in the void between stars, Marcus Reed continued his journey aboard the simple transport that had carried him to the trial station. His mission was complete, but he knew there would be others. The galaxy was vast, and humanity's understanding of its complexities was still growing. But for the first time in decades, those future missions would be conducted with the full knowledge and support of galactic civilization. The Silent Protocol had served its purpose, proving that sometimes the greatest victories were won not through force, but through patience, preparation, and the courage to reveal truth at exactly the right moment. Humanity had finally taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors or supplicants, but as equals who had earned their position through 50 years of quiet excellence. The galaxy would never be the same.